Excellent, thank you so much. So I think with that, we'll move to our final speaker, Mariam Meetra, who is at the University of Leipzig, and if I'm translating the German correctly, at the Institute for Communications and Media Studies, is that correct? So she's going to talk to us about the online public sphere as a substitute for women's protests in Afghanistan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us and thanks for the opportunity. Happy to be here after a long trip yesterday. So, women resistance after the Taliban takeover is one of the significant issues that can be studied from different perspectives. From political science perspective or social movements. And my research focuses on digital and online activism from a communication and diaspora communication perspective. I conduct my research on this topic. So my current paper, which is a journal article, explores how exiled women use online activism to counter restricted access to physical protest spaces. It argues that digital platforms offer crucial channels for visibility, solidarity, and political expression. So online platforms are essential for modern social movements, and many different research show that in recent years in different countries, for example, in Egypt, in Iran, in Turkey, online and digital spaces, specifically social media, have been played a fundamental role in upraising and also in mobilizing people to protest and to do collective actions. So that's why I concentrate on online activism of women of Afghanistan in the last 4 years, specifically in exile from a diaspora communication perspective. Why I choose diaspora and exile forces, because in Afghanistan under Taliban, any kind of civic activism online or offline is almost impossible. So we have experienced a few days ago internet shutdown, and it means that any kind of digital activism is also impossible under the current conditions. So that's why the diaspora forces, the role of diaspora forces became crucial in raising voices of women outside Afghanistan. This paper argues that although online platforms cannot fully reproduce the symbolic and destructive force of a street protest under the fragmented and fragmented digital public sphere, but it's still vital for sustaining feminist movement for Afghan women. So focusing on activism in exile, the study examines how digital platforms enable continued advocacy and the preservation of collective identities through analysis of digital activism and a case study of women exiled activist Hamana Zaryapariani. It shows how online space operates as sites of civic resistance for women in exile. Despite the structural barriers and risk of digital repression, the women use digital media and online campaigns to reclaim agency and amplify marginalized voices. I chose Twitter as my platform to collect data and to observe and to study how women using this platform for their activism. And why Twitter? Because Twitter became a political scene for many kind of political activism and also for women in exile after the Taliban takeover. My research focuses digital activism in general. I studied also other platforms like Facebook and Instagram, and I found out that women have these activists have different platform preference. So they are using different digital platforms for different purposes. So they actually use Twitter to continue their political activism outside Afghanistan. How Twitter played a fundamental role, for example, digital documentation is one of the functions that Twitter played in last 4 years in digital and online activism of women of Afghanistan. So when you collect data, you can see that how different types of content, videos, photos, voices, Twitter spaces, all these data are some kind of digital archive for human and women rights violation, for documenting women and human rights violation inside Afghanistan. Digital documentation is one of the functions that Twitter has played very significant in women online activism, and also global attention. So through these campaigns, through these producing different contents, the activists could build an international solidarity. So they could seek attention of international organization as well as activists from different countries. For example, Iran and Pakistan. We have recently seen that in gender apartheid campaign, there is a solidarity group between Iranian and activists from Afghanistan. So as I interviewed activists, they explained that this is a result of our online campaigns that we could seek attention of different activists from different countries, and specifically from other countries of Afghanistan. So that's how Twitter played a role in digital activism of women in Afghanistan. And also, I choose the case study of Temana Karyani. I followed her activism since she was in Afghanistan, and we all saw that when she was arrested, she posted a video. She came on live and recorded a video, and this video went viral and got a lot of attention. So she explained that how that video played a very significant role to save her and her sister's life, and Taliban could not ignore that Amana is under custody. So it's an example of a very small example of how digital activism can affect the women movement. And I pursued her activism also in exile in Germany. Why I choose Tamana for my case, for my study? Because she combined very well a dual function of street and online protest. She also do her online campaign on Twitter, but she did not forget that the street protest is always important to seek attention or to get more collective attention to her feminist activism. So in different German cities, she went to a hunger strike and she protest on the street. And for example, in Bonn and Köln, she explained that she has over 20 protests in these two cities and over 50 protests in different cities in Germany. So this is a combination of online and offline activism that digital platforms or digital activism is a fundamental element for that kind of activism. So I hope that I can find more opportunity to interview also other. For this research, I also interview other activists who have experience of participating in street protests in Afghanistan, and as a result of their activism, their protest, they forced to exile. So this is one point that we cannot very easily distinguish between women activism inside Afghanistan and those who are now continuing their advocacy in exile. Data collection is through semi-structured interviews, observation of Twitter accounts, and the content that's being published in the personal accounts, and also they're running some online campaigns on Twitter. So this is my data sources, and also for my theoretical framework. During my studies, I found out that Habermas public sphere theory and also the Donna Haraway theory and also cyberfeminism align with my study. So I combine different theories to study and to conceptualize women online activism in exile. So one of the primary findings that I can share now is that digital activism is vital, fundamental, and crucial for social movements, but it will not be a replacement for street protest. So it can be a replacement. It cannot be a replacement. Can serve as a side-by-side opportunity or possibility, but under authoritarian regimes, under oppression, we cannot totally expect that online activism can be replaced of street protests and street activism in any under any condition, because the street protest has its own impact, and people should have the possibility to go to the streets to raise their voices. So otherwise, digital activism is not as impactful as a street protest. So this is my very brief introduction of this research, and I hope to hear your recommendations and questions to develop more results.
Very good, and thank you to all our speakers for staying under time. I think that's the first time we've been at the conference, so that's excellent. I'm going to hand it over to Kristen now to kick off the discussion.
Thanks so much, Hannah. So several of our speakers already mentioned the internet blackout this week. And of course, there's a question now about the reliability and certainty of internet access in the future. And I wanted to ask you guys this. It seemed to me that even though on the one hand, the internet blackout did serve to draw more international attention to the situation of women in Afghanistan, it didn't necessarily produce interventions in the same way that we have seen internet blackouts, for instance, in Egypt during the Arab Spring, mobilizing people around the world to intervene and provide access. It also seemed to me that as a result of the internet blackout, there was a lot of heightened tension between diaspora Afghans and Afghans in Afghanistan. So this seemed to raise some questions about how Afghans and Afghan women in Afghanistan and outside of Afghanistan understand themselves as part of a single group identity versus as two separate groups with their own identities, which perhaps raises some questions about solidarity. So I was wondering, particularly maybe Mariam and Nazifa, but also Hasina, how you see the internet blackout and its ramifications changing questions of identity, solidarity, and then also practices of resistance for some of these activists, these women.
Yeah, I can go first, although you mentioned me last, but that's okay. Very briefly, I was trying to find out a policy brief that I wrote for national interest about internet blockage, but it was so short and the issue got resolved. So I don't know if the paper is still relevant to be published or not, but it's very complicated when it comes to Afghanistan. Elon Musk have given Starlink to Ukraine, and it helped the Ukrainian military a lot. Even in the case of Iran, it was deployed there until the regime banned it. But until now, there's 100,000 people that use Starlink in Iran. In the case of Afghanistan, it's complicated because I think does the U.S. government want to involve Starlink? B, does Elon Musk care about Afghanistan? I mean, Ukraine was something like, okay, his ego was like, I think, boosted. But there are other companies. If the US government really wants, they can create public-private partnerships and care about it. When it comes to the how it has affected the identities, and what else did you say? Identities, solidarity,
Solidarity, maybe
solidarity
particularly across borders.
across borders. So with my research, where half of my participants were inside Afghanistan and half outside, which were people who just got evacuated outside. So they were not Afghans in diaspora, fully established, but recent evacuees. You could see that there was some fragmentation. There was some disagreements, some seeing their identities differently as people who are inside trapped and people who could make it out, right? And the women who were inside, they had a lot of grievances about not being able to leave, being stuck. All the challenges that they face are much more severe and different than women who has made it out, even if it's Pakistan and Iran. So that's one thing. And the other complaint that in my research I heard over and over from different participants in Afghanistan was that most of their social and political activism in the international sphere is being kind of stolen by the big faces, figures, and the actual work is done by them. They are the one who created the social movements from nothing. They never had any financial funding, any technical support, nothing. And they were bottom up mobilization of grassroots, which is very hard in the case of Afghanistan because most Afghans are used to free money for anything. So bringing together 100 Afghans, and each, by the way, each one of these social movements claim to have at least 100 members, active members. So that means my study was 3,500 people who were actively resisting Taliban with those 3 years, right? They saw that the people, the women who were inside Afghanistan saw their identity different from the ones outside, even among the evacuees. But specifically, they had grievances against these bigger faces or women who left the country after Taliban came, but they are representing the social and political movements in the bigger arenas. And these women who are still stuck in Afghanistan are not given the same opportunity. When it comes to internet blockage, I think it was so fast that before, as per my understanding and knowledge, I'm part of these WhatsApp groups of women social movements. I didn't see any mobilization or solidarity building because it was so quick. It happened and then they brought it back. But as you say, when internet goes out, it's such a big issue, right, around the world. Like it's just people go into survival mode. And so many activists and people talked about it, but there was no mobilization of what we can do about it that I saw. However, if it stayed longer, I could imagine people inside and outside mobilizing and trying to do some sort of an advocacy or activism about it. Sorry if I talk too much.
No, that's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add something on what Hasina's already said. Inside Afghanistan, very few people, or the percentage of access to internet is very low for different reasons, specifically among women. First, a lot of women cannot afford to buy internet and do not have access to devices, computers, mobile phones, and this is the most important point that we should come to that every time we talk about internet access in Afghanistan. And also under Taliban, it's very scary, it's very dangerous and risky for women to still continue the advocacy with their real identities. Some of them are forced to close their accounts, and some of them are using social media with synonyms. They cannot use their digital, real names and identity. And women who are still active in diaspora, they claim that they're representative of women inside Afghanistan and they are raising their voices. So it's a complicated question to distinguish between women who are inside and outside Afghanistan because they are claiming that we are raising the voices for inside Afghanistan in prison and they cannot raise their voice. So that's a collective identity is a complicated question that cannot be answered very easily. If we came to solidarity, yes, solidarity groups are shaped, solidarity among women inside and outside Afghanistan exists, but it is still fragmented. there is not a lot of agreement on some specific issues. For example, I can give an example about cricket. Women activists, for example, on Twitter campaigns separated into groups. Some of them are supporting cricket team who are close to Taliban, some of them are against that. But they are claiming that we advocate for women's rights. But it's fragmented and it's still issues that are not solved among women. So it's really, for me, not very clear that these solidarities or these collective identities are really bold or not, or we still need to think about it and question about it, and it can be studied in the social science theories that we can answer this question with how women activists inside and outside Afghanistan define their collective identity.
And I will, after you very comprehensive answers, I'm not sure that I will be able to add more. But what I think that the time limit was very short, and the question is very relevant, and I think it's important to explore this further and to see how they have understood their common identity and how the solidarity was built. But at the first day of the blackout, what I observed is journalists that our media was kind of broadcasting a special program, and it was just that people were, whether woman or man, they were just worried about their beloved one, to know about their whereabouts. So, like, there was not a lot of time to have the data to examine and to answer your question precisely, but it's a very interesting question.
I just want to briefly add about collective identity. Forgot that was part of your question. My research of political and social movement leaders, one of the findings, very interesting findings, was that women of Afghanistan, when it comes to their challenges that they face, the issues that they went through in the past 3 years, although they are very much aware of their intersectional identities. When I talk with a Hazara woman or a Pashtun woman or a woman from, let's say, a marginalized background, lesser education, younger woman versus older woman, the intersectionality is very clear. It comes out. Their challenges are very much, tied into their intersectional identities. However, one of my questions for the interview was, looking at this collective identity, they see themselves as women. Can they come all under the same umbrella identity of womanhood? And luckily and happily, most of them, in fact, all of them, saw the challenges, faced them because of it was sex-based or gender-based discrimination and violence that they were facing. And in the second stage, they saw their other identities, which is very rare in the case of Afghanistan, because the question of national identity, collective identity, especially if you ask the same question from man, might be, challenging. But that was a good finding from my interviews.
I just want to add one point also about collective identity. Ethnical issues also play a role in women activism in Afghanistan, because it's intersection. Women are facing intersectional discrimination. Not only their gender identity, their ethnical identity also plays a role in how Taliban treat them. A Hazara woman is faced intersectional discrimination based on her ethnical identity, gender, language, and religion. So we cannot ignore this, because it's a multi-layered and intersectional oppression and discrimination against specific groups. So it's important that should be considered from women's studies in Afghanistan.